Today on Voice of the Valleys, the UK government has just announced that it has committed a national equivalent fumble of losing their car keys by announcing that they have misplaced and lost track of about 150,000 illegal migrants. We're also going to be talking about Rhyl, the recent rape gang that broke in the news up there, and about why the problem might even be worse than we thought when we look at some of the stats that people have broken down. We're also going to be looking at some of the lunacy around COVID the last couple of years and how the systems that were put in place to usher in the totalitarian state under the guise of protection were truly bunk to begin with. And the mayor of London tries to obfuscate from the problems going on with his city by reporting that reports of crime stats are down, but does that actually mean that crime is down? No, of course not. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, thank you for tuning in yet again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys with your host and friendly neighbourhood far-right thug, the always satirical, except when he's not, Mr. George Cresswell. Hope we are all doing well. Got a lot of topics I want to get into today. First off, thank you to everybody that's gone over and watched the video, somehow a video of me talking for about an hour. It's this one, which was, I believe it was number 38 or 39, whichever one it was. Number 39, where we talked about the UK police retrospectively accessing passport photos and what's called a historic breach of privacy, right? More and more ushering in this Orwellian state. That's nearly at 800 views. That's actually my best video to date, I believe, aside from one short, which went to like 1,500 views or something like that. So, and it's just me talking for an hour. It's just me talking for an hour, and it has an overwhelmingly positive response. I've read some of the comments on it. Some of them are a little bit negative. Some of them, which I'm going to be addressing one of them today. One of them, or a lot of them, just asking questions, but the response overall with the likes has been overwhelmingly positive. 95.5% like on that video for something with so many views for such a small channel is truly, truly amazing. It's an amazing feeling. And thank you very much to everybody who's gone over and watched it, maybe shared it, all of those things, commented, whether they've been positive or negative comments. Always appreciate it. And yeah, just hopefully this trend will continue. Thank you to everybody who's recently subscribed as well. I noticed the subscribers have recently been ticking up as well. So in the last, let me see if I can quickly find the numbers. I've had a plus 106% over the last 28 days in terms of subscribers, which is truly, truly amazing, guys. So thank you very much. Was not expected whatsoever. So if I can just quickly go, I'm just trying to find the exact. Is this a number of subscribers, or is it number of views? I think this is views. See if I can. Yeah, I can't find subscribers for some reason. Here we go. Let me just see if I can find the subscribers. Here we go. Yeah. So in the last day or so, I believe we've had an uptick of about 20 or so, or nearly 20 or so so yeah, something that for such a small channel is very, very noticeable. So thank you very much. Just hope you enjoy it. Hope you find it useful, obviously, more than anything, because this content is not necessarily to be enjoyed. It's to try and spark some discourse and make people aware of what's going on more than anything. Anyway, that's a long introduction out of the way. I mentioned before in the headline article for today with the Telegraph, ministers lose track of 150,000 migrants. The government has admitted, this was published yesterday, it has no idea how many foreign workers remain in the UK. And we've seen that because they don't like to track the data on these things. The Welsh government is the same. You try looking into whatever stats it might be, crime by ethnicity or crime by demographic, whatever it might be, entry numbers. The government seem to want to lie at every turn, but this is another case now where it's not just malice, it seems to be incompetence as well, where they can't even keep track of their own incompetence and their own malice. So apparently they have lost track of more than 150,000 migrants who have come to the UK on social care visas. So I might have said in the intro that they were the small boats. They've come here on social care visas, so it might not have been all small boat migrants and all the rest of it. But it says here, in another article from June, immigration is the biggest burden on the NHS, say Labour voters. where is it? Because this was an article that was linked in the other article that I'm going to read more from now. We have Maxwell Marlowe, the Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute, which commissioned the poll. The poll that they're referring to, by the way, is a poll of 2,000 Labour supporters by Merlin Strategy, which found that 1 in 5 Labour voters would now consider casting their ballots for Reform UK. Research carried out in May on May 24th for people who voted Labour in 2024. 5 factors they believed which was the biggest burden on the NHS. 24% said high levels of immigration, whilst 22% said the mental health crisis. And the response from Maxwell Marlowe said, "It is clear that British people felt the impact of mass migration on healthcare. Unless the government moves quickly, urging immigrants to purchase private healthcare as a requirement for any visa other than tourism, then they will continue to hold the government accountable for the very rapid deterioration of their access to healthcare." Got some interesting interviews hopefully coming up that are really going to highlight things which I've spoken to people in the past. I've spoken to Victoria Rickson, I've spoken to Justine Winter, I've spoken to Lisa Peregrine. Got 2 interviews coming up hopefully in the near future. People that have really suffered at the hands of the healthcare system in this country through negligence, through all manner of other things, through incompetence in many instances, through malice. So stay tuned for those coming up in the near future. The government has admitted it has no idea how many foreign workers hired to plug gaps in Britain's crisis-hit social care system are still working in the industry. It is not even known if they remain in the UK, as there is no official data linking visa status with ongoing residence in Britain. So this is the thing. What really screams this to me is that the government have obviously tried to obfuscate, in many instances not tracking data or anything like that. Now that's really coming back to bite them in the arse, because people have these questions, people want these questions answered. Trust in the government is an all-time low. Now they're just having to come out and admit we have no idea how deep our incompetence and how deep our malice in many instances runs with the immigration that has just been used. And I say this not with any hatred towards any person necessarily that's come over. I say it in this way, that immigration, the way that the immigration policies have worked out, not necessarily in theory, but in practice, because obviously in practice it's worked out very differently to how it was supposed to work in theory, which people voted for, right? People voted for example, in the Conservative government, at least scaling immigration back, which many people obviously weren't happy with, but at least scaling immigration back to the tens of thousands every year. Instead of getting that, they got hundreds of thousands of millions coming in every year for their trouble. So that's what I mean. What was promised didn't work out in practice. And I kind of lost my train of thought as to where I was going to go with that. I kind of lost my train of thought to where I was going to go with that. Oh yeah, that immigration by lying politicians has been used as a weapon against the British people. And it's been used as a weapon of subjugation and ruining their ability to resolve the problems democratically. That is why, for example, that Plaid Cymru float the idea about that they want to bring 1.5 million refugees from Gaza. It's not from the bottom of their hearts, although I imagine that a lot of them are indeed more on the side of Gazans than they are on the side of Israel, for example, and are more angry at the state of Israel than they are really caring about the dead children and stuff like that. But they see it as a voting bloc that they want to import. They see it as a voting bloc that they want to import. Because make no mistake, if that was to happen, Wales is a country of about 3 million, 3.2 million, thereabouts. That would be enough to shift pretty much every, voter constituency in this country. Make no mistake about it. And they're not doing, as I said, it from the kindness of their own hearts. They're doing it because they see it as a weapon to remove the native Welsh person's, in this instance, because Plaid would be a Welsh government figure, right? The native Welsh person's ability to resolve their problems democratically. And that's what they want. That's what they want. Okay, they're globalists in nationalists' clothing. Care staff were added to the UK's skilled worker scheme in February 2022, allowing them to come to Britain on a health and care visa if they could secure a job with an employer approved by the Home Office, which obviously is just basically a foreign office, amid fears the industry would otherwise collapse. Since then, the UK has granted 154,402 visas to migrants providing, quote, caring personal services in Britain, allowing them to stay here for up to 5 years at a time. And I'm very, very sceptical of this as well. Due to how many videos you see circulating on X, and I know X is a very big hotbed of anger, But it is the one place where you're going to see things that you won't otherwise see on mainstream media outlets because they don't want you seeing them. And there is an alarming trend that I'm seeing with these migrant care workers coming over and in many instances being very, very abusive to the people that they're supposed to be taking care of. That's not a problem that's unique to them whatsoever, obviously, but there is an alarming trend. There is an alarming trend I see emerging with how many clips you see on social media. And as well, obviously, there is the thing to note as well that sometimes the same clip gets reshared several times and it makes you think that there's a lot of more of these instances going on than there otherwise would be. But this is where government transparency really does matter. When the government then comes out and says, we have no idea where these people even are, it doesn't fill people full of confidence. Doesn't fill people full of confidence. That's where many instances another aspect where large levels of immigration have ruined the trust in society, because it's basically brought a bunch of strangers in that we don't know who the hell they are, put them into position of care over your relatives, and then you're supposed to just trust these people. You're supposed to just trust these people. I'm sorry, no. I'm sorry, no. There will be more trust with people whom you know and that are similar to you in your society. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. Poles, for example, they keep their state very, very ethnically homogenous, and they control the border very strongly for this exact reason. For this exact reason. Because yes, you're going to have bad people within your communities. Yes, absolutely. But ferrying in a bunch of strangers that have no reason to care about you or anything like that, and have no reason to do it, and they're just doing it for money and benefits, that's going to make things a hell of a lot worse. And that's what we're seeing all across Europe. And that's a sad reality. That's a very, very sad reality, unfortunately. Since then, as I said, the UK has granted over 154,402 visas approving migrants, providing care and personal services. And all of these are taking the jobs as well of native British people, native Welsh people, English people, Scottish people that are otherwise doing the training to fill these roles. That they wonder why they can't get a job then when they go out of college or they go out to university. They wonder why they can't find it half the time. Right? Because they've already been filled up. They've already been replaced. And it's designed, in many ways, just to ruin the structure of the British family. Structure of the British family, because it stops people from getting good employment. It stops men from getting good employment, for example, because they get fired for the political views or whatever. And then that damages their ability to have a family. That damages their ability to have a family. So they're supposed to be the head of the family, spiritual head of the family, absolutely. I know many people are going to get triggered just by saying that. Supposed to be the head of the family in that way. They can't have that without stable employment and stuff like that, and actually giving the woman in this scenario a reason to respect them, right? Saying that as somebody that has yet to really rebound myself. That's why I basically throw myself headlong into this, because it's really the only thing that I can do, having been fired for political views myself. And it does put a strain on things. It does damage your reputation. All of these things. You do come across as lazy and incompetent and all of these things. And it's all by design. It's all by design. All fruits of feminism and a feminized government as well, which massively benefits from the feminist ideology. Satan is the greatest feminist of all, after all. But again, it's all designed to destroy the family. And people have sadly taken that attitude up in droves. You say about traditional family structures and stuff like that, now people recoil as if you've said a prayer to a demon in many instances. And we'll talk about some demonic things later as well. But as I mentioned, this is all by design, and this could be solved tomorrow with a competent government, or rather with a government that's not completely evil and turned against its people. The annual total peaked at 107,772 in 2023 before falling to 9,539 in 2024 when the Tories barred people on care visas from bringing family members with them to the UK. Surprised they did. I thought they would have benefited from that, but I don't know. That's what I mean. The Tories in this instance will show that, will make a fleeting, pointless thing in many instances with how many people they allowed to come across the border, but then they can say, oh, well, at least we stopped care people from bringing their dependents, right? At least we stopped care people from bringing their dependents. Meanwhile, they oversaw the largest immigration wave in history, even going back to Tony Blair's remarks, right? Which I'll go back and show you something which he said recently that really signaled the start of all our problems. In fact, I will go see if I can find it now, because it's on this point. When I say that this was all by design, ladies and gentlemen, everything is by design, there's something here which somebody posted 2 days ago from Tony Blair's Forces of Conservatism speech to the 1999 Labour Conference. This would have been, I believe, just before. Let me see when. He was elected in 1997. So again, this was around the time that I was born. I was born in 99, right? So this was around the time that I was born. Tony Blair had been Prime Minister for 1 to 2 years at this point. Okay, he was elected in 1997. And when we say that these people, like Tony Blair, have a lot to answer for, it's for things like this. This is part of his speech that he gave in 1999 that perfectly encapsulates the philosophy behind everything that's done now. Why we had to have our noses rubbed in diversity. Why we had to have all of this stuff inflicted upon us. Why the family had to be destroyed. All of this stuff because he had to destroy what is quote unquote, what is called quote unquote the forces of conservatism. I mean, the forces that meant the British society in the way that it was. At this point, it was still relatively prosperous. Okay, people in my communities like mine, they'd already been destroyed by Maggie Thatcher and all the and the privatization of the industry that she sent off elsewhere, right? So my communities had already been destroyed, but the rest of it had already been destroyed by this philosophy which come out of his progressive government. And it says here, to be the progressive force that defeats the forces of conservatism. Forces of conservatism, again, implying that our way of life had something about it that had what was worth conserving. Think about it, what does conservative mean? It just simply means you want to conserve something. Many people who were conservative in value don't want to conserve the society we have now because it's not British society. You should think about that. Conservative is a very bad word around these places, right? Conservative in value just means that you don't you don't think something should be changed. You think something should be conserved. And we definitely had a society which should have been conserved. Strong family structure. Hell, we started the Industrial Revolution. All of that stuff was worth conserving and developing upon. But it was people like Tony Blair that wanted to destroy it all by design. For the 21st century will not be about a battle between capitalism and socialism, but between the forces of progress and the forces of conservatism. Simply replace forces of progress, quote unquote, with evil and the forces of good, and you understand the wider battle that's going on. You understand the battle that goes on far above Tony Blair, goes on above all of us, the wider spiritual battle that's going on at the moment all across the world. They are, as in the forces of conservatism, he calls them, are what hold our nation back. Not just in the Conservative Party, but within us, within our nation. Speaking within the inherent drives within us to want to have a family, to want to prosper, the family being the bedrock of society, to want to be God-fearing, God-worshipping people, because that gives us purpose and nothing makes sense without it, right? The forces that they do not understand that creating a new Britain of true equality is no more a betrayal of Britain's history than New Labour is of Labour's values. The old prejudices where foreign means bad, where multiculturalism is not something to celebrate, but a left-wing conspiracy to destroy their way of life. He outlined it. He spoke very candidly about it, that he wanted to destroy the forces that were holding the nation together at its very core, which are the values within us. He wanted to usurp the values within us and turn them from good to evil. They were already on the cascading in many ways. They were already cascading down that path anyway at this point, right? The massive rises in feminism movement and the sexual revolution and all the rest of it. These forces were already long in the process, so to speak, before Tony Blair came along. But he came along to give this, said, no, we need to completely rewire people. Then you understand why the propaganda campaign, everything just fell off. Looking back on my childhood now, everything through school, everything that we were being told, everything just fell off. And I can see now that I think back to it from time to time, the indoctrination we were put in through school, which is very left-wing, very socialist, red-coded, right? Red-washed, for lack of a better term. And now it just all makes sense. It all makes sense why things felt completely off. Basically, the entire public schooling that we had was one big giant struggle session. In many instances, not being told about the evil forces of socialism, not being taught about Mao's China, not being taught about the Russian Revolution beyond 1917 and the Soviet Union. Everything throughout the Cold War that I think back to now in history and stuff like that designed to make the US look bad and the Soviet Union look at least not as bad, right? Nowhere was we ever taught about the atrocities that were being committed in the Soviet Union, at least as far as I can remember. I remember the teacher, because obviously I'm not necessarily blaming the teachers or anything like that. They got jobs to do. They just got to do it. They might not even know any better. They might be doing it out of ignorance themselves. Whether they were or not, I don't know. They might have had the sensibilities themselves, in which case that makes it slightly different. But point being, many of them don't have the place to turn to either. If they lose a job, they lose everything, right? So, you know, I remember coming away with it that, you know, the US was the bad guy. The US was the bad guy. I'm not saying the US was perfect in that. I'm not saying the US was perfect by any means. But there was a reason why people were going one way over the Berlin Wall and not the other. There was a reason why so many people were trying to flee to the West and not the East. Unless obviously you're Keir Starmer and you appear in the Soviet Union spy records. All right? But this speaks to a much bigger problem, is that we now need to undo the programming that's done within us, that's been done within us. You might not even have realized it until you've heard these words coming from a man, which if you look at him, if you just look at him, let me just have a look at this. If you just, and again, you might accuse me of cherry picking photos or whatever, but when you look at this, when you think back to the people that elected Blair in 1997, again, this obviously he looked a lot different back then. But evil has its effects on you. Evil has its effects on you. Sadly, our previous generation weren't able to pick up on that. Maybe they were too eager to go along with it. Maybe they were too eager to reap the fruits, right? To reap the fruits of virtue signaling, of feeling good rather than doing good, and protecting your own country and your own people and your own sovereignty. We were so keen to give it away because this is and has been now a perfectly orchestrated campaign, and people are realizing it. One thing I want to touch on before I move on to the next part, which is more about how Labour, hang on a minute guys, there we go, more about how Labour is destroying our countries, is that I mentioned before in the last episode, or is the episode before, I can't remember, that there was that group that was marching in, and this is part of another worrying trend in many ways. There was a group that was marching in Melbourne in the streets, the Nationalist Socialist Network, I believe they were called, and I thought that they were more of a PSYOP campaign, right? It does appear that I may have been wrong on that. It does appear that I may have been wrong on that, because I've seen more people on X, for example, commentators on the right, even potentially more to the right than I am, right? Very much so, more, you know, extreme, quote unquote extreme, because what is extreme nowadays, opinions than me, right? Saying that it's mad how a group like the Nationalist Socialist Network are now able to pull together like a crowd of about 1,000 people. And that, you know, with the lurch to the left that we've been forced into against our consent, and we've said that we don't want to go there every single time, and our politicians have done it anyway, by removing the incentive, as well as in many people's eyes, the ability to resolve this democratically and politically, they've now created, especially among young people, the most right-wing generation in history. All right, whether they meant to create it or not, but they've now created, especially among young people, many young people, some of the most fanaticized right-wing generation in history. And history is a precedent for how things go when these things happen. I'm not saying they're going to pan out the exact same way as they always have done throughout history, all right? But the biggest thing is this didn't happen by accident. This didn't happen by accident. This happened, as Keir Starmer said, by design. And many people going for these groups now feeling that they have to do so out of necessity. This is also not good, because you have both sides now rising. They're going to come to a head one way or another. And I said, if you think you've seen rivers of blood already, I don't think we've seen anything yet, unless this does get resolved. And it's only going to get resolved one way, by the people getting what they want. One thing I don't think the people do want, however, segueing into my next story at the moment, is the people who were in prison serving 10 years or more being released early. So this came out today, Monday the 11th, at time of recording, by the way. Robert Jenrick slams Labour's scheme to reduce jail overcrowding as quote-unquote soft justice. But obviously the Labour government needs to now create more room in our jails for people that put up saucy social media posts, right, than for child rapists and murderers and gangbangers, Satan-worshipping gangbangers and all the rest of it, right? It's more so MS-13 in America, that one. But, you know, people in prison, they're not necessarily in prison for doing good things, right? You know, for the most part. We see more and more people in prison for putting up hurty words on social media, which can in many ways be seen as a good thing because they're trying to highlight problems that we're seeing in our society, right? You know, much like the obfuscation around a certain mass stabbing incident in Southport, right? The people tried to say that it was a Welsh Christian boy, right? A Doctor Who fan, and it was a radicalized Islamic fanatic, right? From Rwanda. But Shabana Mahmood said that the early release scheme, don't be surprised, ladies and gentlemen, that a foreigner in this position is doing what she can to destroy the country, right? The early release scheme is aimed to avoid a total collapse, quote-unquote, of the prison system. Prisoners serving sentences of more than 10 years have been released early by Labour. Some 248 convicts sentenced to 14 years or more in prison and 490 criminals handed sentences between 10 and 14 years have been let out early under a scheme to reduce jail overcrowding. In total, 26,000 inmates have been released early since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. Within days of last year's general election, Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, announced plans to release prisoners early to avoid what she said would have been a total collapse of the system if left unaddressed. And think about it. A lot of these prisoners that we have in prison in Britain at the moment, which, if you listen to people that have been inside, on the inside, for example, are dominated in many instances by foreign gangs, a lot of them motivated by Islam and all of this stuff, right? We could just, say bye and put them on the next plane and it's their home country's problem to deal with, right? And people say, like, oh, well, they might have been born here. I don't care. Wherever they route straight back to, it's their problem. We could alleviate a lot of problems that way. We could alleviate a lot of problems that way with, people that have committed crimes. They're from Albania, whatever other countries that you want to go at, right? They've even said, right, under Labour's new scheme where they're going to start deporting more and more people. See if I can pull this up as well a bit quick. They're going to start deporting more and more people. But it came out recently, somebody posted about it, I'll just see if I can find it a bit quick, that the scheme itself will not even target the 9 biggest countries where these people come from. Okay, I don't know where it is. Okay, I'll have to see if I can find it on the next one. So anyway, there's more things I found that I want to go into as well anyway. But this is not compassionate. Like what Matt Walsh says, that if you show compassion to the guilty, you show cruelty to the innocent, right? And this is the thing, showing cruelty to innocent people by letting these people out early. In many instances, these people are already not in prison for as long as they should be. They're violent criminals, murderers, rapists, pedophiles, whatever it might be. They're already not in prison for as long as they should be. And then you want to let them out early. That is a gross injustice to innocent communities and innocent people, right? Especially then, when people who've just put things up on social media will get sentences far beyond anything that should ever be given for the nature of the crimes that they commit. And that is, again, an injustice to the innocent. That is an injustice to the innocent when you leave people who've committed disgusting, violent crimes out early. You imprison people for years for things that they say on social media. This is not a good and virtuous society by any means. At least, however, the prisoners jailed for sexual offences, terrorism and serious violent crimes carrying more than 4 years have been excluded from the scheme. That's good. At least. That's good. I wonder how long it will last. Because the social media discontent on the part of the people is not going to slow down. But at least there's something good about it. But in many instances, when you see people doing heinous things with children or having possession of child rape material in the tens of thousands of Class A material, and the worst they get is a couple of months in prison, well, they're going to be, they're not going to be barred from it. And there's no deterrent then. There's no deterrent. You give somebody 3 years for that, and they could potentially even be let out early on that. What's the deterrent to stop them from going and doing it again? There really isn't. There really, really isn't. Some 3,500 prisoners are being released early every month, which is more than 150 each working day. That is staggering. This means about 40,000 prisoners will have been released early by the end of this month, by the end of August, if these trends continue. So, again, like I said, everything is being done, ladies and gentlemen, to the point where you're going to see rivers of blood like you've never seen them before. You know, a massive offensive for good and a massive offensive for freedom, as I believe Richard Nixon said. So, a little bit of extra context now for you, though, ladies and gentlemen, around we should be keeping an eye on what's going on in Rhyl at the moment. Again, Rhyl, quiet town where you think of old people going to retire, right? If you're not familiar with Rhyl in North Wales, along the coast, very, very nice place. In the summer 2 years ago, no, about 3 years ago, about 3 years ago, me and my dad went up, mentioned that in the last episode, and it was really, really nice. Just really, really nice. It's a really, really nice place, especially in the summer. Very quiet. You know, you'd think very low on crime, not a lot of people, right? And we mentioned that there was basically what was a foreign rape gang operating in Rhyl. 4 people, as I mentioned before, Mustafa Iqbal, Mohammed Usman Ashad, Zayul Badshah, and Jaswinder Singh, right? Operating what was basically or what's been described as a child trafficking ring. I call it a child rape ring because they've also been charged with rape and violations of the Modern Slavery Act. They holding what we assume would be a teenage girl, because that's the people who were implicated in this as well, the victims, in some kind of slavery environment, like, you know, you're holding them against their will. And then the other one is human trafficking, right? So child trafficking as well. As I mentioned before, 4.3% of Rhyl's southwest population is what they call Asian, right? Asian being the euphemism often, right? To try and get away from the actual reality of what's going on, right? They'll call people Asian in order to try and obfuscate from the fact that they're predominantly Pakistani or they're predominantly Bangladeshi or whatever it might be, right? Often unfairly grouping in other groups of Asians who have nothing to do with this. Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, right? All of these other people that really have nothing to do with this. But what this means, right, according to this person, I'll put the post up in the description for you to go and read this yourself. This is really, really alarming. Is that this guy's come up with a stat of what this means is that 1 in 24 adult Asian men in the area have been arrested for child sexual abuse. Now, already that is staggeringly high, obviously, but it gets even more alarming when you go to the ratio, when you filter specifically on Pakistani, Indian, and Bangladeshi men. It goes to 1 in 3. It goes to 1 in 3, 33.3%. That is really, really staggering. That is really, really staggering. And in many ways, as I go through a thread now, seems to be even worse than some areas elsewhere in the country, like Telford. Telford, for example, as this guy put in the comments, but I'll go through some of the others. This guy on X has made a big thread of all of this, which I'll read out some of them now. And you can go look at it yourself. If the numbers are true, truly staggering, truly staggering. So in Telford, for example, you had 1 in 8 named as suspects, 1 in 11 arrested, but only 7 in total were convicted. But here's a massive thread, right? There's a massive thread. So Rotherham, for example, 1 in 38 adult Muslim men in Rotherham have been convicted for grooming gang crimes on children as young as 11. All of these have articles cited, by the way. I have not gone and read all of them at this moment in time. Some of them are from The Guardian, some of them are from The Independent, some of them are from the BBC. So you can go and read these all for yourself. All of the articles are in this thread, which you can go and read. Rochdale, approximately 1 in 137 adult Muslim men were convicted. Convicted, mind you, this is convicted in this one. As one victim said, some of the men involved were arrested, tried and found guilty, but not all. So odds are the actual perpetrators, the actual number would be a lot lower. It would be 1 in a number that's a lot lower because the number of people convicted have been a lot lower. Telford. The Telford inquiry reveals that during Operation Chalice, approximately 1 in 8 adult Muslim men in Telford were identified as suspects and 1 in 11 were arrested. So I will pull up this article a bit quick and just give you a little bit more info into it. So this is from The Independent, as I mentioned, because Telford was in the previous comment that we went through before. So it'd be pertinent to bring it up now. I hate it. Why won't they let me get rid of the... Oh, screw it. Okay, right. More than 1,000 children were abused by sexual grooming gangs in Telford during decades of failing by police and authorities. An independent inquiry found that rape, sexual abuse, brainwashing, drugging and other crimes had, quote, thrived unchecked in the Shropshire town since the 1970s. Similar findings were issued following the 2014 report into gang activity in Rotherham and investigations in other towns, and the Telford report said that child sexual exploitation still exists today and is prevalent across the country as a whole. So... here we go. The inquiry found that even after a West Mercia police operation was launched in 2009 that resulted in several prosecutions, the Force and Local Council said, quote, scaled down their specialist child sexual exploitation teams to virtually zero to save money. At least one victim of grooming gangs in Telford, Lucy Lowe, 16-year-old, who was pregnant, was murdered, and then her death was used as a threat to keep other victims quiet. Mentioned before the young girl, Charlene Downs, whose media reported that she was actually ground up after being murdered and put into the kebab meat in one of the restaurants, right? We're dealing with disgusting animals here, okay? So, there was another victim, 13-year-old Becky Watson, was killed in 2002 after an unexplained car accident. Countless children were sexually assaulted and raped. They were deliberately humiliated and degraded. They were shared and trafficked. They were subjected to violence and their families were threatened. They live in fear and their families were forever changed. So, I'm just trying to see if I can find the actual stat from this. 1,200-page report found that the abuse was not hidden, and police and the schools and the council had been aware of it since the 1990s. Victims were berated for their lifestyle choices and blamed for putting themselves at risk. Just trying to... I don't believe there's actually a stat in here, but this is just more so the context around what was happening, unless I've accidentally skipped over it. Anyway, that's more of the information as what was going on in Telford, but allegedly then that's resulted in 1 in 8 Muslim men in Telford being identified as suspects and 1 in 11 were arrested. Oldham, you have approximately 1 in 86 Muslims in Oxford have been convicted for grooming gang crimes. Sentence remarks reveals the girls were subjected to horrific torture and abuse. See if it says anything in this one. I know a lot of them, the guy explains later on, as said, is based off of a different document, so maybe this is just more of the context around them. But you can see here, ladies and gentlemen, these are just patterns. These are patterns that people are noticing and that oftentimes are being imprisoned for talking about. And that's why when you see that the ratio in this instance, when it goes to 1 in 3, that you could pass a Pakistani, an Indian, or Bangladeshi man in Rhyl, right? And you have a 1 in 3 chance of that person being arrested for child sexual abuse. That is extremely alarming. That is extremely, extremely alarming. And if it's already that bad, we have to then ask, what do we have to gain by allowing in any more? What do we have to gain by allowing in any more? In my opinion, it's a massive nail in the coffin of multiculturalism and diversity. But as I said, multiculturalism, diversity have all come from the brain of Tony Blair, one of the most evil people that's ever existed. But we've been too keen also to go along with the evil. So somebody left a comment on one of my last episodes. It's the episode that I mentioned that got a lot of views. And I've seen it. A person called me, "You are so deluded. You're so propagandized and deluded." And I believe then they were hinting at my take. One of the comments, which they also left, they left two, was hinting at my take on abortion and immigration. I haven't responded to the comment yet. I suppose I'm responding to it now. Before I get into my next story with how evil some other things that we've done are. And there's two things they mentioned about the realities of immigration and abortion. And the reality of immigration is that it has been used as a political weapon. Okay, I'm not necessarily making any comments about whether it's good or bad in theory, right? Or whether it's good and bad in and of itself. I'm not being, one of those people that says, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I just realized there's something on my lip. I do apologize. I'm one of those people that's going to necessarily say all immigrants are bad and all of this stuff, right? But the problem is that immigration and the levels that it has been applied in Britain has been used as a political weapon. It's been used for redistricting purposes. It's been used for political power. Okay? And that's why people have struggled maybe to explain it that way. Maybe they don't connect the dots in that way. And it makes them seem very hateful. Makes them seem very hateful, right? Not necessarily hate anybody, right? You can't necessarily think that, all humans are born with inherent dignity and all stuff like this, right? That God has given them. And then, go on and say that, whether it's because of race or whether it's because of ethnicity, whatever it is, that people are morally superior or whatever it is than others, right? But you can say that politicians have used immigration unfairly as a political weapon, and that needs to be resolved. And sadly now, it is going to be the people that have come over as immigrants, right, that are now going to have to bear the brunt of that until we deal with the political the political talking heads, the political spearheads that will come afterwards, because they're going to have to be removed in large numbers because they shouldn't have been allowed to come here in the first place. It was the politicians that opened the door, and they all flooded in, whether they flooded in for good reasons or for bad. But our politician had no right to open that door to the extent that they did. Right? They did it anyway without our consent. They did it anyway against the will of the people. So they had no right to do it. So I'm sad when these people, in many instances, may not have committed any crimes, so to speak, like they are going to have to be removed simply because of the decision of a traitorous politician. Right? So that's a sad reality. It's an extremely sad reality. And that's why why in many instances Christians will say now, Christians in particular, make no peace with evil. Make no peace with evil, right? Now people have different definitions of what evil is, but one of the things that I have that is definitely evil is the systematic killing and murder of babies in the womb. And in many instances, the people who facilitate this and want to facilitate this only want to do so to kill the baby. You have people who are outright witches that come out and say that they want to devote the baby to Satan, and they'll actually try and pay people to have abortions, right? And women will go to them and they'll get paid to have this abortion because the witch wants to do it in order to gain some power from what they believe, right? Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. They do, right? Why we don't just live in our individualistic little bubbles anymore. That's one of the big lies of modernity, that people's actions don't have any effect on other people's actions. They do, right? And you do have to be concerned with what other people believe. But this was a case that came up a little while ago where the people in this industry are truly, truly evil, and they are serving evil purposes. In many instances, they know they are. I'm not just talking about women that go and have abortions that then pride them, like Lily Allen, for example, the evil scumbag that she is, singing about how many babies she's killed, right? Singing that she's turned her body, which is a temple, into an Aztec temple, right? And the other woman that she's talking with in that now infamous interview segment. But what about those that even when the baby, against all odds, survives, not to mention we're trying to get abortions passed for any single reason now, trying to use abortion purely as contraception and to get away from the consequences of your actions, right? That's what it is. You think that you can murder a baby simply as consequences for your actions. It is truly a satanic sacrament. It's truly a satanic sacrament. When a baby gets killed in this way, all of hell rejoices. Make no mistake about it. That's a line from Nefarious, by the way. If you haven't gone and watched that film, really do go and watch that film. But this is from South Korea, and an abortionist. The baby survived the abortion. So what did the abortionist do? Normally, you're thinking a baby, and it's a 34-week-old baby, right? A 34-week-old baby is damn near fully formed, right? It's damn near goddamn fully fucking formed. It's well late into the 3rd trimester. Survived the abortion. So do you think maybe then it gave it care to help it survive? You know, you tried to kill it, but oh well, it survived. You followed your plans or whatever. No, they drowned it in a bucket of water. They drowned the baby in a bucket of water. So this is from Life News from 2020. An abortionist in South Korea has been convicted of drowning a 34-week-old baby who survived a botched abortion. The horrific case shows the problem of late-term abortions as a whole, and infanticide, which is exactly what it is a whole world one. It's a worldwide one. The Seoul Central District Court on Friday convicted the abortionist, identified only by his surname Yoon, on Friday and sentenced him to 3 years and 6 months in prison for killing the baby. The child reportedly burst out crying during the abortion procedure after surviving it. From the Korea Times, medical staff who participated in the operation have consistently said they heard the baby crying. A 3-judge panel of the court said in a statement, it is clear the doctor killed the baby who was born alive. Yoon, who ran a maternity clinic in Seoul, received 28 million won, which is about $23,000 for the operation from the mother of the pregnant girl, 16. Yoon was later indicted on murder charges for putting the live baby in a bucket of water. So when I say, ladies and gentlemen, that this is an evil industry, I understand that there's the fringe cases whereby it's the rape of a young girl or whatever it is, or it's whatever, threat to the mother, whatever it may be, right? All of these things. The people want then to use the exceptions in order to make the murder of babies more mainstream. They want to use the exceptions to make the rule, not have the rule in place and deal with the exceptions as they come, right? We want to use those exceptions to make a blanket rule by anybody should be allowed to kill this baby for no reason, or for whatever reason they want, rather. Only because their only justification is that it's in one particular location and not another particular location. Shows the incongruity with the pro-abortion position, which I won't call the pro-choice position, because the choice to kill a baby isn't a choice that anybody has. The baby's no different when it's inside the womb at 34 weeks to when it's outside. It still needs care. It still can't survive on its own. So the viability argument falls apart right away. The viability argument falls apart right away because the baby's not viable on its own. Children really are not viable on their own until they hit a certain age, right? So viability makes no claim here. You know, not that it's a claim anyway. But this is the thing. The whole point behind it is this disgusting satanic ritual where they want to kill and sacrifice babies. And these are the fruits, I know many people don't want to hear it, these are the fruits of feminism. These are the fruits of feminism, which ultimately go back to Satanism. So the origins of feminism go back to like Wiccan practices and truly, truly evil people that fundamentally believed that there was no differences between men and women, and that women, in order to achieve full fulfillment, needed to go into the workplace and do spreadsheets and all manner of things and not have babies because they were imprisoning them, right? Many young people are learning how much they were conned in that regard. So I say that to this person who left the comment, assuming that they were on more of the pro-abortion side, the immigration has been used as a weapon against the British people, and abortion is child sacrifice. There's no two ways about it. There's no two ways about it. It's as simple as that. And as I said, in the UK especially, they want to try and expand this stuff. So I believe this is in the UK. It might not be in the UK, but it was posted by Right to Life UK. There was a pregnant mother, and because her baby had Down syndrome, at 38 weeks they offered her an abortion. Thank God she didn't, and the beautiful child was born. I'll show you the video for that coming up on screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen. Video coming up on screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies, it is in a small box in the middle of the screen, but yep, here's the mother explaining what they offered her now.
And even being offered termination at full term on the Friday and giving birth to him on the Sunday.
What was said to you?
She's turned around and said to me, you do know we still terminate babies with Down syndrome at 38 weeks.
And what did you say?
I said, well, I'll pretend I didn't hear that. because I was completely blown away, shocked and disgusted. And here he is, Hector, and, you know, he is absolutely beautiful. Aren't you? Yes. He's got a modelling career, you know. He is, and so are you.
Yeah.
And, you know...
They would have murdered this kid. They would have murdered this kid purely because he had Down syndrome 2 days before he was born. So whether you agree with it, whether you go with the Clinton line, which was really a lie that is safe, legal, and rare, whatever it is, the whole lie that if you legalize abortion, you're going to have less abortions, or at least you're going to have less people going to back alley abortions, but on the whole, you'll have less, right? When you criminalize something, you do have less of it, right? So, yeah, this is truly, truly disgusting. And this is what I mean. It's an evil industry. If you support, the other thing is, the only logical argument for this is that you cannot support it at any point. You cannot support it at any point because it is at every single point the deliberate ending of a human life. And that is murder. That is murder, because even when it is in its smallest state, the fertilization, it is life, because it is undergoing the cellular practices that all of us undergo. It is growing every single day. It is life, and it is of the human species. It's not of a deer, right? It's not of a caterpillar. It's not of a dog. It's a human. It's life, and it's a human. Therefore, if you interrupt that and you stop that and you put an end to that life, that is murder. That is murder. It is the only logical, and you can make that purely from you don't even need to, you can make it just from a secular standpoint, because life begins at conception, because funnily enough, there's no other place it can begin. There's no other place it can begin. The processes that bring about human life begin the moment of conception. Any scientist worth their salt will tell you that. All right? You can make arguments about viability. You can make arguments about all of this, whatever. You can make all of those arguments, but life begins at conception. So the point is that you want an excuse to end a human life just because it's inconvenient, ultimately. And there's many ways that comes about. And I say that with sympathies of women that have been, I know women that have conceived through, not good means, should we say. And I know people that have been faced with that choice and have taken the virtuous option and have chosen not to let the baby bear the brunt of that, bear the mortal consequences for the disgusting actions of their father. It's tremendously strong and virtuous women that do that. But tell me that it's a virtuous, good, empathetic, really morally good industry where they would kill this child 2 days before he's born purely because he has Down syndrome. That they would say that he has no moral worth whatsoever because he has Down syndrome. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. So now, ladies and gentlemen, now that we got that out of the way, we're going to round off with our last couple of stories now. So this is from more on what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. So a while ago, I had one of my videos get a little bit more successful than the others. It was talking about the church being hit in Gaza and stuff like that. And it does seem that the conflict is somewhat intensified still. That Israel, and I know a lot of people are saying that they're not going to beat the terror state accusations on this one. I hope I didn't freeze then. My webpage froze. So it broke yesterday, I believe it was, that Israel has eliminated the entire Al-Jazeera team in Gaza. Now, I've got a short clip from the BBC here for you, ladies and gentlemen, where apparently it is true that this was live from Jerusalem yesterday, that indeed the entire Al-Jazeera team in Gaza has been eliminated by Israel.
Have had a big team in there. As I understand it now, their entire team in Gaza City has been killed, but they had a big...
So they had a big team there. I cut it off a little bit early because it's only an 8-second clip. So they said I had a big team there, and they have all been killed, apparently. I know it's going to spark up a lot of anti-Israel sentiment. And I'm not one of these people that is you know, quote unquote Zionist. I don't really like the terms. I think you can be for other reasons, such as stability of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and stuff like that, for example, and it remaining not as part of a Muslim caliphate, which I think would be very damaging. You can be somewhat in favor of the state of Israel, but certainly you have reasons to either be against it or criticisms of the government and all of those things. I perfectly understand those. So I'm not one of these people that simply because you say anything bad about the state of Israel is going to call you an anti-Semite or whatever. But important to remember, however, that especially with Al-Jazeera, I'm going to try and find another bit of context about this, is that this is an article from the Telegraph. It says Israel kills Al Jazeera journalist accused of leading a Hamas terror cell. So when we say that these are journalists, have to remember questionable motives and very often very sympathetic and actively working with Hamas. There was a quote-unquote Al Jazeera journalist, which I'll see if I can find now for you, ladies and gentlemen, who was actively holding, a little while ago, one of the hostages in his house. Let me see if I can find it. So he was killed. I believe. So Noah Argamani was held in the home for 8 months, was held hostage in the home of an Al Jazeera journalist. Again, Al Jazeera journalist, quote unquote. 26-year-old was held in the home of Abdallah Al-Jamal, a Gaza-based reporter and photojournalist for the Qatar-owned network, according to an Israeli newspaper. But Israeli special forces raided the home. This was back in June last year. Of Al Jazeera journalist, and several of his members attempted to prevent the Israeli woman's rescue and were reportedly killed. So this is the thing. When you hear this now saying that they were journalists. Even one of the people that were held captive in Gaza has commented on this from a screenshot that I've seen. I was held by a journalist in captivity and his father was a doctor. And apparently this guy, as I mentioned now before, so this is the guy who had, this is from the Al Jazeera page on their website. This is the guy that was holding Noah Argamani in his home. It makes you think, why are journalists holding hostages in their homes? Surely that makes them an accessory to the war, because they are holding hostages against their will, and the hostages were taken in a disgusting terror attack against the Jewish people, right? But now, one of the prominent Al Jazeera correspondents, Anas al-Sharif, has been reported to be the leader of a Hamas terror cell in Gaza. 7 people died in an attack outside the Al-Shifa hospital, including Anas al-Sharif, reporter Mohammed Kreike, however you say that, and Anas Sharif, reporter Mohammed, however you say his surname, and 3 camera operators. The IDF confirmed it killed al-Sharif, calling him a terrorist who posed as a journalist. Here, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is a photo of al-Sharif, I believe it is. And again, you can see that he's got the Al Jazeera microphone and he's got the press kit on. So for those of you not seeing, you've seen this young gentleman, very well groomed and not looking like he's starving, right? But he's got the blue press jacket on and he's got the Al Jazeera microphone in his hand. He's now been accused of leading a terror cell in Gaza, so one of the Hamas cells. A press badge isn't a shield for terrorism, an IDF spokesperson has said. Intelligence and documents from Gaza, including rosters, terrorist training lists, and salary records, prove he was a Hamas operative integrated into Al Jazeera. Al-Sharif, 28, was killed on Sunday after a tent for journalists outside of the gate of the hospital was hit, a statement from Al Jazeera read. The well-known Al Jazeera Arabic correspondent reported extensively from northern Gaza. So this is the thing. People will jump on this and again, I want this, I personally want this war to end as soon as possible. So I want the hostages returned and I want kids not to die. I think that's what we all agree on. But again, this just shows how deeply entrenched and how many avenues these people, Hamas, a lot of the Gazans who are sympathetic to them, right? A lot of them are not. A lot of them, the Christians and people who speak out against Hamas, they suffer brutal consequences, right? How deeply entrenched they are with people who are regarded as mainstream, reliable journalist networks when they also, whether they are outright members of the association or aiding them and they are accessories to them, like, what's his name again? Oh, have I closed the tab on accident? Here we go. Like the Abdallah Al-Jamal, right? That might not be a full member of Hamas, but he's helping them. He's helping them by holding a young girl hostage. I'd be like, you can't then get too much on Israel's back for wanting to rescue its own people. I would be the same if it was, you know, say England that came over here and did October the 7th to us in Wales, right? I'd be the same. I want my government. Obviously, you got to take into account we're a united nation with one, you know, UK military, right, or British military, right? We don't necessarily have a Welsh military in and of itself, right? But if we were to have our own military units, I would be wanting them to do everything possible to get our people back. And if there was a journalist of the other side, an English journalist who was holding one of the hostages in his home, I wouldn't cry for him whatsoever. I care about us getting our girls back. So I fully understand that. Again, even if you don't like the state of Israel or whatever, you could at least have sympathy for a young girl that's been captured, you know what I mean? And you can do that and also have sympathy for the young children that have sadly been killed in the war on the other side. You can do both. I'm probably going to get flack from both sides on this one. But again, it just goes to show how deeply entrenched, seemingly, actual terrorists are. They're in Hamas, and now Al-Jazeera is being the front propaganda unit for them, as well as many in the West. And speaking of propaganda, particularly in the West, this is something that was very interesting that came out the other day. Going back to COVID now, there's a couple of things I want to share on this before I get on to our last bit. Guy says, here, this is from James O'Keefe, I probably shouldn't be saying this out loud. The National Institute of Health, right? National Institute of Health, the chief of it confesses that the COVID initiatives were completely made up. The Post quotes, I don't even know if these vaccines stop you from getting COVID. They don't. He adds, we're all going to learn, quote, we're all going to learn about vaccine safety when it's too late. As Pfizer and Moderna are just getting a bunch of money, vaccines were accelerated through the approval. We fly under the radar of being scrutinized. I don't think I have too much to worry about. Trump victory was also a worse for the NIH. So this is, speaking to an OMG journalist, apparently the head, the National Institute of Health, admitting that all of the COVID initiatives, all of the COVID stuff, was basically complete bunk. It was basically complete bunk, and everything was to do with money, and they put public safety second to getting more money and getting more influence. This guy's name, by the way, is Raja Cholan, Chief of Health and Data Standards Branch at the NIH. Here is what he had to say.
What do you think about the NIH now that you were working there?
Probably shouldn't be saying this out loud. They might have funded a lab in Wuhan, China, to make and Pfizer and Moderna are just getting a bunch of money from all these vaccine mandates.
Raja Cholan is with the National Institute of Health.
For other vaccines, like measles or whatever, you had to go through several rounds of approval, but these were accelerated through the approval.
Do you think that the mRNA stuff is safe? Because really affects people with the myocarditis stuff?
Well, I think we're all going to learn when it's too late.
I think that's important. The lack of
How
effectiveness of the vaccine product.
Like the 6-foot rule, remember that? That wasn't based on any real evidence that did anything. It was completely made up.
Well, what do you think? Happened be real with it.
Raja then brings up politics, talks about which political party he prefers and what would happen to him and NIH under an incoming Trump administration.
I think it would be worse for the NIH. I think it would be better for a Democrat to be in office. We sometimes fly under the radar
Yeah.
of like the really strict guys. I don't think it would impact you. I don't think I have too much to worry about. That's not recording, right?
Oh, sadly it was, my friend. Sadly it was. But yeah, it's good to show the importance of journalists, not only with integrity, going back to the point where we mentioned that, as I said, journalists were aiding terrorists by keeping hostages in their houses. Journalists with integrity uncovering stuff, that this stuff had to be taken as gospel in 2020 and 2021. This stuff was preached like a gospel, and if you went in any way against it, you were treated as akin to a blasphemer, right? People were arrested. People were told they couldn't take their kids to parks. Meanwhile, you had Black Lives Matter rioting up and down the country in America. So truly, truly disgusting stuff. But now to learn, this stuff came out. This was shared to me recently. But James actually posted this back in November. So it's just truly, truly disgusting stuff that they knew this all from the start. They knew this all from the start and conned us into it every single turn. And the incentives that were given to go along with this, when they knew that the vaccines weren't safe, they knew that people, you know, were cottoning on to what was going on. The propaganda effort was insane, right? With Stephen Colbert and all the rest of them. But this is something that appeared in Sky News. This was from November 2021, but I only saw it recently. Did you know, ladies and gentlemen, that in order to bribe people into having the coronavirus jab, Vienna Brothel offered customers 30 minutes with a lady of their choice in exchange for it? Vaccine uptake levels in Australia are among some of the worst in Western Europe. Roughly 64% of Australia's population is fully vaccinated, and those who are unjabbed are now banned from visiting cafes, restaurants, and hairdressers, treating them a way a leper would have been treated in the old world, right? For actually doing the good thing and the virtuous thing, for standing up against what we now know is a medical tyranny and basically a bioweapon, is what it was, for many people are saying. But a brothel in Vienna provided COVID-19 vaccinations and gave up... fucking hell, I can't even say this. I say this. Giving them a free voucher for those who take up the offer for 30 minutes. This just goes to show how disgusting the society has become, right? That you'll basically inject yourself with a bioweapon if you wouldn't before. Again, I don't know what this is, ladies and gentlemen. I am very sorry. There we go. If you give in to, you know, your disgusting, sordid impulses and go and you'll have, you know, 30 minutes of a quote-unquote great time with this person of your choice, or you just accept this bioweapon that we want to put into your arm. That's truly, truly disgusting. But it shows people were being bribed to take it with bacon rolls and all of this stuff. Are we really letting our standards for ourselves fall that low, ladies and gentlemen? Fun Palast was hoping to increase the vaccination rates as well as client numbers, which have dropped off because of the pandemic, according to Mail Online. In exchange for a jab, visitors get a free 30-minute session in a sauna club with the lady of their choice, quote unquote. And it literally says there's an image here, ladies and gentlemen, of a prostitute, presumably a prostitute, in a skimpy nurse's outfit with a face mask on, with a mock syringe in one hand and like what looks to be some kind of sexual object in another. I won't pull the image up on screen because obviously it would probably get the video taken down, obviously. But very skimpy, basically nothing on the bottom half. You can imagine the kind of outfit that it is, right? And yeah, it just goes to show the depths of depravity. The depths of depravity that we have sunk to, and the moral rot, the moral corruption that we've allowed to set in. When all of this stuff, people that were trying to speak out about this stuff were imprisoned, convicted, and silenced at every single turn, right? Because you had Debbie Hicks, for example. So this is shared by Dr. Dave Cartland on X. She was arrested, convicted, and fined for filming an empty hospital in December 2020. And this is also echoed in an article that was written by somebody that I interviewed a little while ago. I'll see if I can pull that article up now as well, just to talk about it before we finish off. Nicola Lund, when I spoke to Nicola, she sent me this article across, an article she wrote for the Conservative Woman outlet. Talking about the Dragon's Heart hospitals, the Nightingale hospitals. So April 13th, 2023, the second largest Nightingale hospital in the UK opened its doors, named the Dragon Heart Hospital, or Ysbyty Calon y Draig. It was located on the pitch of the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. It was the only temporary hospital in Wales to be utilised, despite £166 million being spent on such Welsh hospitals and building contract deals with 40 million subsequently revealed. Pardon me. So this is an example of the kind of thing we're talking about. This is not the exact one, but this is an image she included in the article of the entrance to a Nightingale hospital. So this is one that's in London. So this is the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. Imagine this temporary hospital that was set up on the field of the Principality Stadium, right? So what were these Nightingale hospitals and why are they so important, or why are we going to talk about them in a moment? Dragon's Heart was operated by the Cardiff and Vale University Health Board. Its CEO at the time, Len Richards, explained that the hospital name, chosen among suggestions from the general public, is inspired by the legend of the Red Dragon standing steadfast in the face of adversity. The project involved 5,000 planning hours, 650 contractors, 30 members of the armed forces, and 8 million in capital spending from the Welsh government. So, where is it? Here we go. The primary focus of this hospital was on patients coming to the end of their illness and those recovering to return home, allowing more capacity to become available with intensive care wards elsewhere for critical patients. Makes me think this was just a massive tax thing, massive tax scam, if anything, because we'll get into the video in a moment of how the hospital seemed to be empty anyway. The page also claimed that there would be patients on palliative care plans located at the site. This is what Nicola was told over the phone when her aunt, who had been admitted to the hospital after a fall in April 2020, was transferred to the Dragon's Heart for rehabilitation the following month. They said that her aunt had tested positive on admission to Llandau Hospital, despite having been housebound and home alone for 13 days. She was then shoved into a COVID ward and given a do not attempt resuscitation, also known as a DNR, instruction, and an end-of-life care pathway in her list of anticipatory medications. Notably, her hospital notes included the written clinical observation, COVID-19 onset consistent with bacterial pneumonia, demonstrating that medical staff did know for sure what to diagnose. However, this is getting towards the end of the article now, what her aunt said about it was that the hospital was open, or this is not what her aunt said about it, but the hospital was open for less than 8 weeks, and then her 88-year-old aunt was discharged. Bear in mind, they were going to put her on a DNR, an end-of-life care pathway, right? 1 week before it was closed down on June 4th. She told me that a 99-year-old woman was discharged at the same time and came home saying, "I think they're exaggerating it," referring to the pandemic. She told me how, on fine sunny days, some patients would be taken in wheelchairs outside into the sun, and that she passed hundreds of empty beds. Of course, these good news stories of old dears beating the virus and returning home completely evaded press attention. So, come back to this, ladies and gentlemen. Hundreds of empty beds, and think they're exaggerating it. Then you understand that Debbie Hicks, in 2020 December, was arrested, convicted and fined for filming an empty hospital during a time authorities told us that hospitals were rammed. Here is that video for you, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies, the video quality is quite low, but it's coming on screen for you now.
Empty hospital, look at it. This is a disgrace. I've never seen, oh my God, look at this. It is so dead. Please do not sit here. Yeah, not much chance of that, is there? All the people in our country desperately waiting for treatment, cancer treatment, heart disease. Look at this. Honestly, this is making me so angry walking around here. This is making me angry. Share the hell out of this, guys. Truth. Look at the truth here. Do not come back to this place with bullshit when there's a completely empty hospital I'm walking around.
Don't blame her for being angry. Don't blame her for being angry. I would be. I was taken in by all of it. I was taken in by the propaganda back then, right? I was taken in by it all, but tells you a lot when they have to imprison, arrest, convict, well, not imprison, but fine and convict people for saying this, for highlighting it, shows that everything wasn't on the up and up from the start. This was back in December 2020. This was back in December 2020. And yet justice is still not done. Justice is still not done. And this is why when people say that it was the largest cash, wealth, power transfer in history, or at least in recent history, it absolutely was. It absolutely was. Think about it. How come the hospitals were so rammed, right? Hospitals were so rammed, but yet there was more TikTok dances and everything from nurses and staff and everything on social media everywhere. How did they get all the time to do all these TikTok dances and trends and all of this stuff during what was supposed to be this massive pandemic that was going on? Hospitals were rammed. They were supposedly rammed off their feet, right? And the nurses and everybody else had all this time to do these TikTok dances and trends. Just goes to show how powerful the propaganda machine has been, that we didn't even place these basic things together. And speaking of propaganda, Mayor of London is no stranger to it. There's no stranger to it whatsoever. And he shared these key crimes down in London. Apparently, that versus last year, knife crime is down 19%, residential burglary is down 10%, theft from the person is down 13%, personal robbery is down 13%, apparently. Yet they've had to implement more measures than ever. The more diversity barriers than ever. The purple lines, the big purple line saying mind the grab, how come it's lower than ever, but now we have to have mind the grab lines? But not only that, this highlights something which they're never going to tell you. Well, the biggest thing as to why it seems as though these numbers are down, is because people stop reporting them. People have stopped reporting them, is what we can gather from this. And it's gone to the point, I said this, and others have echoed this sentiment as well. And I want to see if I can find the post that I made, because I share this, what I feel is a very, very important stat, which sort of blows everything out of the water with regards to this. Notice he doesn't consider sexual assault as a key crime when you have, for example, stats like this. And this is not the one I wanted to refer to. This is not the news article I wanted to refer to. But when you have stats like this, shows you why he's mentioned these ones, if anything, and not, for example, the sexual offences in London going all the way back to 2015 and 2016, 2024 to 2025. So for those of you who are not watching but listening, ladies and gentlemen, the graph shows that number of offences in the year 2015 to 2016 was just over 15,000. It was about 16,000. And it's gone up to over about 27,000 in 2024, 2025. It was just below 25,000 last year, and it's gone up by another 3,000 this year. So again, shows you that not everything is up on up with our glorious Mayor of London. But another harrowing stat, which you see people referring back to time and time again. I won't find my post exactly, but not only that, is that when you have a look at some of the other crimes as well, and how it's trended overall, for example, since 2016. Somebody shared this graphic online. I'm not exactly sure where it is from, but what has risen since 2016, I would imagine this is a grok output, and do bear in mind this is referencing Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt, but it's worth sharing. Knife crime overall, about 9,086 from the year March 2016. Or year to March 2016, about 14,000 a year to September. Theft offences non-violent, up 23%. So there is more than meets the eye here. Or there are more than meets the eye. And the biggest one, which you'll see referred to time and time again, is this headline, ladies and gentlemen. This headline from the BBC, which I can't find the exact article where it's from, but I screenshotted the headline a little while ago. This article from the BBC, which comes up time and time again: rape reported every hour in London. Charities say the true extent of sexual offending will be much higher, as not everyone reports these crimes. And that's what you're seeing. That's what you're seeing when the Mayor of London, who is our enemy, make no mistake about it, he's an enemy colonizer, says that crime is down. It is a complete lie. It is a complete lie. Crime has never been higher. The capital city has never been more of a shithole, right? Primarily due to immigration from shithole countries and shithole cultures. But now, because the police don't respond to things unless it's a spicy tweet, because there's a rape going on every single hour and nothing's done, because there's rape gangs operating at every single point, because people are being put in prison for even saying anything about it, people just don't report the crimes anymore. People don't report the crimes anymore. And that's sadly what you see. That's sadly what you see. So don't be fooled when your politicians try to say that things are all rosy and good, ladies and gentlemen. They're not. They're not. They're trying to pass it off as it is, and they're trying to hope that you fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Thank you very much for watching. As always, ladies and gentlemen, we'll leave it there for today. Hope you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Catch up with you again very soon. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Rhyl, see you next time, and you take care now. Godspeed.